The stray dog appeared at the police station again, just as he had for the past several months. His golden fur was matted with dirt, his ribs faintly visible beneath his coat. But what stood out most wasn't his ragged appearance, it was his persistence. Every day, without fail, he trotted to the station's front steps, sat down, and waited. If ignored for too long, he would whine, pace, even bark in short, urgent bursts. And yet, no one paid him any real attention. "Damn mutt's back," Officer Daniels muttered as he passed the station's glass doors. "What's he want this time? A badge and a patrol route." A few of the younger officers chuckled. "Maybe he's a secret agent," another joked, tossing a half-eaten sandwich toward the dog. The animal flinched but didn't go for it. He wasn't begging. He never begged. Jake Carter, leaning against the counter with his coffee, had watched this routine unfold too many times. Unlike the others, he didn't find it amusing. Something about the dog unsettled him, not in a bad way, but in a way that made him feel like he was missing something important. He took a slow sip from his cup, watching as the dog paced toward the woods behind the station. "Anyone ever wonder why he keeps going back there?" Jake asked aloud. "Who cares?" Daniels scoffed. "Stray's probably just looking for a place to die." Jake frowned. He wasn't so sure. That night, the storm rolled in fast, thick sheets of rain hammering the pavement, thunder rattling the station windows. The streets were empty, the town tucked away behind closed doors. Jake was finishing up paperwork when a sharp scratching sound echoed from outside. He stood up, walked to the glass doors, and nearly dropped his coffee. The dog was there, soaked to the bone, shivering, pawing at the door with an intensity Jake had never seen before. His nails scraped against the glass, his eyes wide with something almost frantic. Jake hesitated. Then the dog barked, once, twice, loud, urgent. Something was wrong. Jake grabbed his coat, pushing open the door. Cold rain slapped his face instantly, but the dog didn't react to the downpour. He turned and bolted toward the trees, pausing only to make sure Jake was following. All right, I'm coming," Jake muttered, hurrying after him. The woods were denser than Jake remembered, shadows twisting under the flash of lightning. The rain made the ground slick, his boots sinking slightly with every step. But the dog didn't slow. He weaved through the underbrush like he knew exactly where he was going. Jake's heart pounded. Then, suddenly the dog stopped. He stood rigid, ears pricked forward, his gaze locked on a patch of dirt just ahead. Jake approached, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The ground looked disturbed, uneven. "What the hell is this?" he murmured. Then he saw it. A metal corner, barely visible beneath the mud. Jake crouched, swiping away the dirt with his sleeve. The object beneath was a rusted storage crate, large enough to hold something, someone. Jake swallowed hard. The dog let out a low whimper, nudging the crate with his nose. Jake didn't need to be told twice. He radioed in for backup, his voice steady, but his gut twisting. He had a feeling this was only the beginning. Jake's radio crackled as he took a step back from the half-buried crate, his pulse drumming in his ears. "Dispatch, this is Officer Carter. I need backup at my location, north side of the station, deep in the woods. I've got something unusual here." A pause. Then static. "Copy that, Carter. Units en route. What exactly are you looking at?" Jake exhaled, his breath misting in the cold air. His fingers hovered over the rusted metal, tracing its edges as the dog stood beside him, tail stiff, ears alert. "Not sure yet," Jake murmured almost to himself. Thunder rumbled overhead as he planted his hands on either side of the crate and pushed against the lid. It didn't budge. The thing was locked tightly. He ran his fingers along the seams, searching for an opening. His flashlight beam glared off a thick padlock, corroded but still intact. The dog whined again. Jake turned to him, narrowing his eyes. "You've been trying to get someone to look at this, haven't you?" The golden retriever didn't move, just stared at the crate like it held something he needed Jake to see. A low rustling noise in the trees made Jake's breath hitch. He swung his light toward the shadows. Nothing. Probably just the wind. Still, something about this didn't sit right. Moments later, headlights cut through the rain as two squad cars pulled up on the dirt path behind him. Doors slammed. Footsteps crunched over wet leaves. Officer Daniels was the first to reach him. "What the hell, Carter? It's pouring out here. What's so urgent?" Jake gestured toward the crate. "This. Found it buried under the dirt. Lock still on." Daniels' brow furrowed as he crouched down. He ran a hand over the metal, his expression shifting from annoyance to something more serious. "Damn. This looks old. But why would it be out here?" Sergeant Miller arrived next, shaking water from his coat. "What V we got?" Jake stood, rubbing his hands together for warmth. "Not sure yet, but if this dog's been trying to tell us something, I'd say it's worth checking out." Miller studied the dog, then the crate. He nodded once. "Daniels, bolt cutters. Now." The rain thickened as Daniels jogged back to the cruiser. Within minutes, he returned, metal cutters in hand. He positioned them around the rusted lock and clamped down. The metal groaned before snapping clean in two. The dog let out a sharp bark. Jake grabbed the lid and pulled. It didn't give immediately, years of dirt and rust sealing it shut. But with a grunt and one final yank, it creaked open. The smell hit them first. A wave of something foul, earthy, metallic, rotten. Daniels gagged. "Jesus." Jake swallowed the bile rising in his throat and aimed his flashlight inside. And then, his stomach dropped. Bundles of fabric. Stiff, faded with age. But beneath them, something pale. A hand. Miller cursed under his breath. Jake's mind raced. He pushed the flashlight beam lower, revealing more, a partial skull, fragments of bone. The fabric wasn't just fabric. They were clothes. This wasn't just an old storage crate. It was a grave. For a long moment, no one spoke. Rain drummed against the metal lid, the wind whispering through the trees like a specter. Daniels was the first to break the silence. "How long you think this has been here?" Miller's jaw was tight. "Hard to say. But this isn't just some accident. Someone put this here deliberately." Jake turned to the dog, whose gaze hadn't left the crate. How long had he known? And more importantly, who put this body here? Thunder rumbled again, low and ominous. Miller straightened, his expression hardening. "Carter, I want this area sealed off. Nobody touches anything until forensics gets here." Jake nodded, but a gnawing thought had already taken root in his mind. This was just the beginning. The forensic team arrived within the hour, their floodlights slicing through the gloom as they cordoned off the area. Rain pooled in the uneven forest floor, turning the soil around the crate into thick mud. Officers murmured among themselves, but Jake barely heard them. His focus remained on the dog, who sat just outside the perimeter, watching every move with unwavering intensity. Dr. Evelyn Harper, the department's lead forensic analyst, knelt beside the crate, her gloved hands carefully peeling back the deteriorated fabric. Male victim, likely mid-30s. Judging by the decomposition, he's been here a long time. Possibly over a decade. Jake exhaled sharply. A cold case. Someone thought this body would stay buried forever. Sergeant Miller stood over the crate, arms crossed. Cause of death. Dr. Harper probed further, gently shifting brittle remains. Then, her gloved fingers stopped. Here. She pointed toward a jagged indentation on the skull, just above the temple. Blunt force trauma. He didn't get in this crate on his own. Daniels let out a low whistle. So we've got ourselves a murder. Miller's expression darkened. And whoever did this went through a hell of a lot of trouble to keep it hidden. Jake turned to the dog, whose ears perked up at the attention. His fur was slick from the rain, his paws muddy, but he remained rooted in place as if waiting for something more. "You knew, didn't you?" Jake murmured, crouching to scratch behind the dog's ear. The retriever whined softly, then stood abruptly. His nose twitched, his eyes darting past the officers and into the forest. Then he bolted. Jake cursed. "Hey, wait!" Without hesitation, he took off after him, ignoring Miller's sharp command to stop. His boots slipped against the wet ground, branches whipping at his face as he plunged deeper into the trees. The dog moved like a ghost, weaving effortlessly through the undergrowth, leading him farther from the crime scene. And then he stopped. The retriever stood rigid, tail raised, eyes locked on something half hidden beneath a fallen tree. Jake slowed, breath heaving. He clicked on his flashlight. The beam illuminated another crate. Smaller. The same rusted metal. Jake's heart pounded. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. The dog whined, pawing at the dirt near the crate's edge. Jake swallowed hard and reached for his radio. "Miller, you're gonna want to see this." Static. Then, "What now, Carter?" "I found another one." Within minutes, the crime scene was swarming with activity. Officers pushed through the dense foliage, their flashlights slicing through the darkness. Sergeant Miller arrived first, breathless, his face etched with frustration. But the second his eyes landed on the crate beside Jake, his expression shifted, first to shock, then to something grimmer. Dr. Harper knelt beside the second crate, her movements slow, methodical. Jake felt the tension in the air as she unlatched the rusted metal, revealing its grim contents. A much smaller skeleton. Silence fell over the clearing. Jake clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. A child. Daniels let out a quiet curse, stepping back as if the weight of the discovery was too much. Even Miller, the hardened sergeant who had seen more crime scenes than he could count, looked visibly shaken. Harper's voice was steady but filled with an undercurrent of grief. Judging by the size and structure, this was a child. Likely between 6 and 8 years old. She glanced at the first crate still surrounded by officers. "I think we just uncovered a family." Jake exhaled slowly, trying to ground himself. The dog sat beside him, his head lowered, his ears twitching as if he, too, understood the gravity of what they had found. Daniels finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "Who the hell does something like this?" No one had an answer. Miller straightened, his jaw set. "We're not leaving this forest until we find out." He turned to the officers. "Sweep the area. I want every inch of this place searched." The dog suddenly let out a sharp bark. Jake turned, following the retriever's gaze. The dog was fixated on something deeper in the woods, something none of them had noticed before. A third crate. Jake's pulse pounded. "Jesus, there's more." The officers moved cautiously, closing the distance. This crate was partially buried, hidden beneath layers of leaves and debris. The rust was thicker, the locks fused shut with time. It had been here the longest. Dr. Harper hesitated before speaking. "We need to open it." Miller nodded. "Do it." It took 2 officers with crowbars to pry the lid free. The moment it cracked open, a wave of stagnant air escaped, thick and foul. Harper leaned in, her flashlight sweeping over the remains. Then she stopped. Her breath hitched. Jake could see it before she even spoke. The bones were smaller, more delicate. An infant. A sharp, suffocating silence settled over the team. No one spoke. No one moved. The dog let out a low, mournful whimper. Jake swallowed past the lump in his throat. An entire family, murdered and discarded like trash. Buried here for years. Miller turned away, running a hand over his face. Daniels stood rigid, his gaze locked on the forest floor. Even the officers who had been in this line of work for decades looked shaken. Jake crouched beside the dog, running a hand over his damp fur. "You led us here," he murmured. "You didn't stop until we found them." The retriever leaned into his touch, but his eyes remained on the crates, as if standing vigil. Miller exhaled sharply. "Bag everything. We're taking this case apart piece by piece. Whoever did this, we're going to find them." Jake nodded, his resolve hardening. The dog had spent months trying to tell them something. Now it was time to listen.